Hello and welcome to the Raw podcast brought to you by the Sunderland Echo. We're back for another preview podcast, and today we're going to be looking ahead to Sunderland's championship match against Plymouth Argyle at Home Park this Saturday. So to preview the game, joining myself, Joe Nicholson, we are joined by Chris Errington from Plymouth Live. Chris, Plymouth back in the championship after winning League One last season with 101 points. So how have they done so far back in the second tier?
First of all, good to be able to join you today, Joe, and talk to you about the game against Argyle. I know it's going to be a long trip for you guys to come down to Home Park, but the stadium has been well developed over recent years, and hopefully that you guys, as well as all the fans that will be travelling down, I know there'll be 1,600 Sunderland fans down at Home Park, will have a safe journey and a good day out down in the far southwest. How have Argyle got on this season? I think they've done pretty well. I don't think their league position reflects, I feel, how they've played. I think they've been better value for the 16 points than they've got from 16 games. They've won 4, all of those at Home Park. That was one of the keys to their League One title success, their superb form at Home Park last season. They won 20 out of the 23 home league games, and that clearly was very important to them winning the league. They've won 4 at home this season. They've scored a lot of goals at Home Park as well. I think it's 5 of their 8 home league games this season. They've scored 3 goals or more. They scored 3 against Huddersfield, 3 against Blackburn, 3 against Sheffield Wednesday, 6 against Norwich. Goals have not been an issue for them. So they've done well. They're more than holding their own. They just need to tighten up a little bit at the back. A few too many silly errors. The last game before the break against Leeds United was a great example of that, where Leeds were clearly the better team, but the 2 goals they scored in a 2-1 win over Argyle were both caused by Argyle mistakes deep inside their own half. So on balance, I think they're doing okay. They just need to work on just a few little areas just to make sure they start picking up just a few more points and just give themselves some breathing space over the bottom positions in the table.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the goals that they've scored there, and just looking at the league table, Plymouth are 19th, but they've scored 27 goals, which is the same number as sides like Sunderland, Southampton, Leeds, all teams in the top 6. So it looks like they've taken quite an attacking approach since promotion. So kind of how have they kind of approached coming back into the championship? Yeah,
I think there was some thought that maybe coming up into the championship, Argyle might try and be a little bit more defensive-minded. And they do, play on the break a little bit, particularly away from home. But they've got some very good attacking players in their side. Morgan Whittaker, Barley Mumba, Finn Azaz, Ryan Hardy, who's out injured at the moment, Luke Cundall. People like that have all chipped in with good numbers of goals. Morgan Whittaker in particular, I think, is the key man for Argyle at the moment, and definitely proved himself at championship level with Argyle. So they've scored plenty of goals. They've generally played a 4-3-3 formation. Now, they have varied it a little bit, but they've generally gone 4-3-3. They take the game to teams where they can. It was interesting talking to Stephen Schumacher at his press conference on Thursday, Joe, where we were talking about the game against Sunderland, and he thinks there's quite a lot of similarities between the 2 teams in the respect of, one, both of the very young sides. If you look at the players on each lineup, there's a lot of youth. There's not masses of experienced players, and he also thinks the playing styles are quite similar. I think he thinks there's going to be goals in this game, and Argyle's track record at Home Park this season would suggest that as well.
Mm-hmm. When you mentioned Barley Mumba, they're a player that Sunderland fans will know well, who came through the ranks at Sunderland, but they sold him really before he did have a few games for the first team, but wasn't kind of playing regularly. He went to Norwich, then he had the loan spell at Plymouth, and then they signed him permanently in the summer. So how's he done? I was just looking at where he's been playing, because at Sunderland, mostly he was a centre midfielder. Looks like he's moved more out to the wing at Plymouth.
Yeah, absolutely. He's had quite an interesting journey, Joe, and I think the best way I can tell you how well he's liked down at Argyle was that when he joined Argyle from Norwich in the summer, he was the club's first ever £1 million signing. Now, for bigger clubs and clubs with more resources, £1 million signing these days isn't that big a deal, I suppose. But for Plymouth Argyle, that was a a big statement of one of their ambition coming up into the Championship, but two, also showed you how much they rated him from his loan spell with Argyle last year. Last term he played quite often as a wing back. They would play with three central defenders and then two wing backs, and Barley was either left or right back, left wing back. So this season, when they've gone to the 4-3-3 formation that I talked about earlier, he's normally been used wide on the left as one of the three up front. Seems quite a big change in position, doesn't it? But I think Barley's strengths are his speed, his directness, taking people on, and perhaps defensively as a wing back or even as a fullback, that isn't the strength of his game, the defensive side. So I think playing him up on the left, lots of pace, directness, crosses into the box. He's had a couple of goals, a couple of assists. He's a big fan favourite down at Home Park. I think all fans, regardless of your teams, like to see players with sort of get you off your seats. A bit of excitement, a bit of flair, and he's done really well. I still can't get my head around the fact that at Norwich they just seem to purely regard him as a right back, and I was convinced after what he did at Argyle last season, he'd go back to Norwich and get in their team, but they just regarded him as a right back, and when he didn't fit in at right back, they were ready to let him go to Argyle, and I think Argyle have got a really good young player on their hands.
Mm-hmm. Well, just on a few of the other attacking players, some of whom you mentioned, just looking at Plymouth's last two games, they had a bit of a lack of strikers, should we say, with yes. Injuries. Ryan Harding was out injured, and so was Mustafa Bundu. You spoke to Stephen Schumacher on Thursday. So what's the kind of latest with injuries, and how are those two doing ahead of the Sunderland game?
Yeah, when they played Leeds the last game before the international break, Joe, Ryan Harding and Mustafa Bundu were both out. A young striker they've got called Ben Wayne, who's a New Zealand international, but is still quite raw. He opted not to start him, and so he played with Luke Cundle, who's really a midfielder, almost in one of these false number 9 positions in the centre of the three up front, as it were. Ben Wayne came off the bench at Leeds and scored his first Championship goal, so that was a good little boost for him. He's been away with New Zealand for the last couple of weeks. They've had games against Greece and the Republic of Ireland. He was back training with them yesterday. I would expect after him scoring against Leeds that he will start as a central striker against Sunderland tomorrow. Mustafa Bundu is back training and is available for selection, but having been out for 4 weeks, be a big call to throw him straight back into the starting lineup, having had a hamstring injury. So I think he would be on the bench. And Ryan Harding, who's been a great servant for Argyle the last few years, played against Sunderland in League One, a few years back. Again, had a hamstring injury. He's close, but not close enough to be involved this weekend. They're at home to Stoke next Saturday. Maybe that's a more realistic target for him. So I think Ben Wayne will be the central striker, Mustafa Bundu on the bench as an option to come off and in play the last half an hour or whatever, but no Ryan Harding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely that'll be a blow for Plymouth. He scored 6 goals this season already. Ryan Harding, as you mentioned, he's been a big player for Plymouth over the last few years, but you mentioned a few of the players there who will be key. Morgan Whittaker, you mentioned. So just how important is he to this Plymouth side, and who are kind of the other players that Sunderland fans should be watching out for?
Well, I might be slightly biased, Joe. I try not to be, but I think Morgan Whittaker is one of the best players in the Championship I've seen. I know he might not have the name of some people, and I know that his time at Swansea didn't work out as well as he would have liked, or Swansea would have liked, but he's got 7 goals for Argyle, 3 assists. So that's 10 goal contributions for a team that's come up into the Championship from League One. 22. He's only going to get better. A bit like Barley Mumba at Norwich. When you see Morgan Whittaker play for Argyle, it is hard to believe that he didn't really make it at Swansea. I do wonder if that one of the reasons for that is that Stephen Schumacher, very bright, tactically astute young manager, seems to be able to get the best out of people like Whittaker, Mumba, Finn Azaz, who's a player they've got on loan from Aston Villa. His sort of attacking style of play seems to bring the best out of these players. Morgan Whittaker generally is on the right of the 3 up front. I'm not telling any secrets because everyone at Sunderland will be well aware of this, but if Morgan Whittaker can get the ball on the right, cut inside onto his left foot, find a bit of space, he'll be shooting from anywhere from 25 yards in. That's no big secret because that's where a lot of his goals come from. But for a player that they signed again, another £1 million signing in the summer for them, to come in and get 7 goals and 3 assists in the first 16 games of the season, Argyle have got to be really pleased with a player they've got on their hands with him.
Mm-hmm. When you mentioned Stephen Schumacher there, the manager, and his ability to get the best out of some of the younger players in the squad, he's been there now since I think December 2021 when he took over from Ryan Lowe when he went to Preston. Schumacher then went on and got Plymouth promoted. So I'm assuming he's regarded kind of quite highly with the Plymouth fans.
Absolutely, yeah. And the bizarre thing, Joe, is I think he's now the joint longest serving Championship manager with Ryan Lowe, because they swapped jobs on the same day, and only Mark Robbins, I think, is ahead of him. Which, he's been in the job less than 2 years, and yet he's joint second longest serving.
I think Tony Mowbray's about eighth or 9th, and he's only been at Sunderland about a year.
It's bonkers, isn't it? Who'd be a manager? But it was a Argyle wouldn't say it was a brave appointment, but it was in lots of ways. To go with the assistant manager when Ryan Lowe left, he'd never been a manager in his own right. To lose Ryan Lowe when they did was a big blow because Argyle were on the up. It felt like the club were on the up, but he just slotted into the role seamlessly. You would have almost hardly known there was a change. They were pretty unlucky not to make the playoffs in that first season. They played Sunderland at Home Park on Easter Monday, I think it was, quite late on that season, 0-0 draw. They just missed out on the playoffs that season, even though they got 80 points. So to miss out on the playoffs with 80 points was a tough one to take. And maybe people thought, Argyle, well, that was Argyle's chance to get promoted. But to come back the following season with 101 points, as you said, Joe, 30 wins, 20 of those at Home Park, playing some really attractive football as well. He did a brilliant job. And again, it's a big step up for a club like Argyle, one of the few clubs in the Championship that have never played in top flight football in their history. It's a big step for them. And like I say, 16 points from 16 games. They'd like to have a few more points. Of course they would. But I think looking at the whole body of work, they've played well. There's just one game. They lost 4-1 at Bristol City on a Tuesday night in September. That's the one game where they've played poorly and haven't deserved anything out of it. I think in all of the other games, even the ones that they've lost, that they've been in the games. They've been competitive. Even up at Leeds last time out, Leeds were much the better side in the first half, but Argyle came back into it in the second half, and they lost 2-1. But there was 37,000 Leeds fans all whistling loudly for the final whistle in the closing stages as Argyle tried to nick an equaliser. So they've been very competitive. And I think Stephen Schumacher deserves a lot of credit for what he's done at Argyle over the past couple of years.
Mm-hmm. What would you say the kind of aim is for Plymouth this season? What do supporters think is a realistic target for their first season back in the Championship?
Well, during the international break, Joe, the club sort of announced this 5-year plan, mission, what they want to do in the next 5 years. And the aim for 2028, and it's quite specific, is to be a top 6 Championship club with Premier League aspirations. So that's it in a summary of what they want to do. Now, we asked Stephen Schumacher about what he thought of the 5-year plan. And yeah, he's all in favour of having plans, but he said the priority is staying up this season. That is the first part of the plan, to stay up and then build from there. So yeah, they'd like to, finish as high as they can. In my pre-season predictions, I went for 17th. I thought they'd finish 17th, and I'm going to, I'm sticking with that. I still think that's a very realistic target for them to achieve. After Sunderland, they've got 4 of the bottom 7 teams between now and Boxing Day. So after this game on Saturday, they've got a lot of the teams that are in around them in the league. So if they could get some decent results in those games, then I think, going into the new year, they're in a good place to push on, stay up this season. Anytime you get promoted, you're going to be looking to stay up first and foremost. anything else is a bit of a bonus, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Just in terms of the game on Saturday, you mentioned earlier that all 4 of Plymouth's wins this season have been at home. But just looking at some of their results, you mentioned that 6-2 win over Norwich. They only recorded 31% possession, and I was just looking at their average possession for home games. It was less than 50%. Sunderland, one of the teams in the Championship that do like to have more of the ball. So how do you see the game kind of playing out on Saturday between Sunderland and Plymouth?
Yeah, I think as you just described it there, probably, Joe, that Sunderland, in good form in the league generally. 6th in the table. Looking at the team here, I've got the team from the Birmingham game. You're looking at likes of Roberts, Bellingham, and Clark. Is a pretty impressive trio there. So they might well have a lot of the possession. Norwich did, as you rightly say, and that's where Argyle, against some teams, are quite capable of dominating possession and being comfortable on the ball. But against perhaps some of the stronger teams, they have to have a different way of attack. And that's where I think, the pace of Mumba, the skill of Whittaker, Finazaz is very clever at picking open people with good passes through the centre of the pitch and getting people running in behind. So I do think Argyle, when they need to, they're capable of having plenty of possession and taking the game to teams that maybe come down to home park and are more defensive minded. I'm not expecting Sunderland to be defensive minded. They may well have more of the possession than Argyle, but with the players that Argyle have got, when they're on form and they're playing well, I think they can still cause good teams in the Championship trouble. And like I say, they've played a lot of the top teams now. They've had a few near misses. They lost 3-2 at Ipswich. They lost 2-1 at Leeds. They've had some good home wins against teams like Blackburn and Norwich. So Sunderland will probably start the favourites, but I think Argyle have got some good attacking players. They've scored goals this season. They've got the confidence of an excellent record at home park over the last couple of seasons. I think I'm probably cursing it now, but it's got the makings of a really good game, I think.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen much of Sunderland this season? It's just always interesting to get a perspective from outside of Sunderland of how they're viewed.
Well, you're on the TV quite a bit, so I did see a bit of the Birmingham game because Argyle were up at Leeds that day, if I remember rightly, and it was a 12 o'clock kickoff, and I was in the press room and watched that. I mean, we've played, Argyle and Sunderland have played a little bit in the last few years. It feels like in League One and then now in the Championship. Clearly, they've had a few injury problems, but like I said to you at the start, Patrick Roberts has played against Argyle for a number of teams. Always liked him. Joe Bellingham looks as though he's coming along really. I suppose Jack Clark's the player that everyone's going to pick out, isn't he? Because of his goals, his assists. He's probably Sunderland's Morgan Whittaker in lots of ways. That can create that bit of magic and score a goal from an unexpected position. Looking down the bench as well, there's some proven players there, isn't there? I've always liked sort of Alex Pritchard and people like that. So, and Tony Mowbray, probably one of the most proven Championship managers there is. Is that fair to say, Joe? I mean, he does what it says on the tin, sort of thing, and seems to have gone into Sunderland, which from the outside doesn't always look the easiest club to be the manager at, and he seems to have gone in there and things are fairly smooth and calm, aren't they?
Yeah, no, it's been a very good match so far, as you say, and the clubs will definitely have aspirations of challenging again for a playoff place this season. They're 6th at the minute and after finishing 6th last season. But Chris, thanks very much for coming on the podcast ahead of Saturday's match. We usually just finish by asking our guests just for how do you think the game's going to go and just for a quick score prediction.
I think it will be a good game to watch. Plenty of attacking football. I can't see there not being goals. I'll go 2-2, I think, Joe.
2-2. Yeah, well, was Plymouth's last home game, was that the 3-3 against Middlesbrough?
Yes, it was, yes. Yeah. So, that was quite an eventful game as well. So, and that was, they conceded, then went ahead and backwards and forwards. So, yeah, that was a good game. It could well be something similar. I wouldn't be at all surprised.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll go for a 2-1 Sunderland win. They will be boosted this weekend by Luke O'Nien and Dan Ballard are both back, the two centre halves who were both suspended for the Birmingham game. Ballard missed a game for Northern Ireland during the international break. It looks like he's trained with the team this week, so it looks like he'll be okay for the Plymouth game. But Chris, once again, thanks very much for coming on the Raw podcast ahead of Saturday's game against Plymouth. And for all the latest news, you can head over to the SAFC section of the Sunderland Echo website to find the thoughts of head coach Tony Mowbray, and we'll have more build-up to Saturday's match at Home Park. We'll also have live updates from the game on Saturday as Sunderland take on Plymouth, as well as post-match reaction and analysis. Once again, thanks a lot for listening to the Raw podcast.